Can anyone hear me? Okay. Hi, and welcome to today's session entitled A New Way of Working Using Mindfulness to Transform Effectiveness, Productivity, and Happiness. I am Bian de Guzman, and I am the Program Manager for Bergen Leads, a civic leadership program of Bergen Volunteer Center. Thank you for listening in today, and we appreciate your presence. Lauren Torriello, our Development Director, Melissa LaRobadier, and Erica West, and I will be here with you to assist you during today's presentation. Before we get started, I want to review a few housekeeping items and let you know how you can participate in today's session. I've taken a screenshot here to show you an example of the attendee interface. You should see something that looks like this on your own computer desktop in the upper right corner. You have joined today's webinar listening through your computer system by default. This means if you can hear music through your computer, you will be able to hear the presentation. If you would like to call in using the phone, just locate your audio pane right here and select Use Telephone. The dial-in information and access code will then be displayed. You will have listeners will have different access code and audio pin. You will also have the ability to ask questions using your questions pane right here. Simply type in your questions and click send. At the end of the presentation, we will do a question and answer session and take as many questions as we have time for. Our speaker will also be happy to answer your questions through email. We'll make sure to email her all your questions. Please mute your audio device, and the presentation will be recorded and archived, just so you know, and it can be accessed from our website, www.bergenvolunteers.org. Can I just get a quick survey of what industry are you from? If you could just answer this simple poll. Okay, and you will see it in your screen. Which of the following categories do you primarily work for? Please select one: corporate, nonprofit, government, self-employed, retired student. All right. Thank you. I can see that we have a lot of people from the government and nonprofit. Right, we have 29% government, 36% nonprofit, 26% corporate, 11% self-employed, and 4% retired and student. Okay. Thank you. And now another one that I need to ask is, how did you hear about the Volunteer Center? If you could answer it right now, please select one. We want to know if you heard about us through the internet, social media, email blast, newspaper, program of the Volunteer Center, and a friend or colleague. All right. And most of you have heard through us through the program at the Volunteer Center and email blast and friend and colleague. All right, good to know. Thank you so much. Now I would like to give you Lauren. Lauren Torriello is our Development Director.
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me? Well, you won't be able to answer, but I hope you can hear me. Hi and welcome. I want to take a minute or two to kind of introduce the Bergen Volunteer Center to all the great participants on this call before I go ahead and introduce our speaker today. Many of you have heard of us, some have not, but most don't always know the good work that we do. Here at the Bergen Volunteer Center, we inspire, train, and develop the volunteers and civic leaders that make Bergen County a wonderful place to live and work. We can boast a presence in 68 of the 70 municipalities here in Bergen County. Interestingly, through our community-based programs, we really touch individuals through each chapter of their life, from youth all the way up through seniors. Starting with our youth and teens with our mentoring programs, youth leadership training programs such as Ready, Set, Serve, Teen Lead, College Roadmaps to Success. We are a great resource for community service hours. Then moving on to your center and mid-age individuals, we have numerous community volunteer opportunities for both individuals and corporations, sort of like our Bergen Leads program. We also have training opportunities like this webinar here today. And then finally, for our senior population, we have our chore service, which not only keeps seniors safe and independent in their homes, but it also keeps them active by providing volunteer opportunities through that program as well. For more information on how you can become part of this movement and be part of Bergen Gives Back, Visit us at www.bergenvolunteers.org. Now, for a little bit of information about your speaker today, Mary Beth Sigler is a senior consultant to the Potential Project, a global organization that has delivered corporate-based mindfulness training in Fortune 500 companies in more than 22 countries. Sigler is also an experienced leadership and executive coach with more than 20 years experience coaching executives and their teams. She works with senior leaders, managers, and high potentials to develop greater professional effectiveness and the leadership tools needed to successfully advance their careers. She specializes in emotional intelligence and mindful leadership. Mary Beth is also a professor at New York University in the area of leadership and human capital. She has had a 15-year personal practice in meditation and mindfulness and is a certified instructor of yoga. Mary Beth, welcome.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
To let it come up. If you could let me know, Lauren, when you see it.
I see it.
You see it?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. And the other thing we were going to do is share my webcam, although it's not letting me click into that. So I'm going to start the presentation without that. So welcome everybody. Let me just get rid of this. So today's topic is a new way of working using mindfulness to transform effectiveness, productivity, and happiness. So I'm thrilled to have everybody here today. That was a lovely introduction. I don't think I need to spend much time on this. I am a senior consultant with the Potential Project. We'll talk a little bit about what that means at the end if you're interested in taking any of this forward for yourself or for your organizations. TPP is a global leader in corporate mindfulness. It was started in Denmark about a decade ago. The research and the work that we do is all based on science. They work with over 150 international clients, thousands of people in 25 countries, and sort of a representative client list, including governments and nonprofits as well. So let's come to the topic today. So what we're going to spend the next half hour talking about is this can be used for you personally in your workday, in your life, to be more effective, productive, and happier. So let's look at what we call the paid reality of modern work life. What does modern work life actually look like? How is that different from 20 years ago? We'll take a look at the neuroscience of that, what that means for our brains. We're going to talk about why attention is so crucial to this and why attention is important to achieving results. And then we're going to talk about that new way of working, which is using mindfulness. Okay. So the paid reality. The paid reality means that today, in every company or organization, whether it's government, nonprofit, or Fortune 500 or small company, most people today feel some sort of pressure. There's a lot of time constraints, and we don't have enough time in the day to get what we need done. Part of the reason is that we're always on, right? Our phones are always on. The email messages are always coming through. And that leads us to information overload. Too much information coming at us, not enough time to get to it all. Do we even need to read it all? And then the D is distracted. Those first three qualities mean that we spend our days in a state of distraction, jumping from thing to thing, our focus going from phone to email to, the laptop to whatever's coming in next onto our desk. So we have a cute little video about what the paid reality actually looks like. See if this looks like something you can relate to. So he's getting more and more and more worried, although most of us, that paid reality is actually real for us. The reason why this is important to today's conversation is that the paid reality leads to what we call ADT, attention deficit trait. And studies have shown over the last 20 years that attention has declined significantly. Our ability to pay attention has decreased significantly. And I think we've all heard about this in modern media, where children are losing the ability to pay attention because of the video games that we're playing. We have some background noise. Lauren, do you hear that?
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, we have some background noise.
Yes, we do have
Can
background
anybody
noise.
just mute their computer? Hold on for a second. They're all muted.
Yeah, I wonder if you can mute everybody. Is on task, right? So 46% of the time, our mind is wandering away from what we're trying to focus on, either because of an external circumstance, something that happens to us that draws our attention away, or because of an internal just lack of focus, right? We trying to focus on something and a thought pops up, oh yeah, what about that thing that I meant to get to later today? Let me look at that. Or, oh, I forgot to schedule the dinner plans that I meant to for this weekend. Let me make that phone call right now. Right, so whether external or internal, our minds are jumping off of task about 47% of the time, which is a lot. And I think we can all understand the ramifications of that and the implications of that for our productivity. So here's a little cartoon representation of what's going on during the day. Right, so we don't even recall sometimes when we're in the middle of conversations what we're saying. That text message pops up and our attention gets pulled away. So let's take a look at the brain and the neuroscience of this. What's happening inside our brains is that 20 and 30 years ago, we had one focus, which is represented on the left by that typewriter. Right, we would focus on one thing at a time. Today, the circle on the right, we have so many distractions, so many things. And our brains are still what we call industrial brains. They work best focused on one thing at a time. And I think we all know what the term is when we don't focus on one thing at a time and we try to do multiple things, multitasking, right? So we're going to look at multitasking and what that means for the brain and what that means for our ability to pay attention and be focused. But, you know, this is a typical day for us. When we're at work, we're sort of thinking about what's happening after work. When we're there doing our activities after work, maybe we're thinking about, you know, dinner later with our spouse or what's happening later that evening. And then when we get there, where does our mind go? It jumps ahead to the morning. This is just a typical human brain. Part of those internal characteristics that are constantly distracting us. And what studies have shown is that focus is something that really has to be trained in the mind. So while we think that we can pay attention to all these multiple things at once, what's actually happening, and you see by the representation of the arrows, is that the brain is switching from one thing to the next. From the clock to the phone to the papers on the desk to thinking about dinner later. We're actually not, our brain from a cognitive perspective, from a neurological perspective, isn't able to hold all of those things at once, but we can get very good at switching back and forth between them. So let's actually try that. We're going to take a multitasking exercise and we're going to do a little experiential learning about why multitasking may not be the best approach for us. So if everybody could grab a piece of paper, it doesn't have to be a large piece of paper. And I'd like you to make 4 lines across the piece of paper. So something to write with, piece of paper, and draw 4 sort of straight lines across. And we're going to do 2 activities, and both are going to be timed. So for the first exercise, on the first and second line on your paper, I'd like you to write, don't do it yet because I'm going to time you, I'm a great multitasker, and then right after that, we're going to write 1 through 20. And we're going to write down when we get to the end of that how long it took us. So I've got my watch, so get ready, pick up your pencil, and go. Right? I am a great multitasker, and 1 through 20. So that was about 10 seconds. And 20 seconds. Some of you may be done. And we'll just let this go for a few more seconds. Okay, so we're at 30 seconds. So hopefully most of you finished in the 20 or 30 second time frame, right? Not too hard. I'm a great multitasker, write 1 through 20. For the second exercise, we're actually going to practice multitasking, and we're going to replicate what goes on in the brain as we switch from one thing to the other. So for this, I'd like you to write I, and then jump down to the line below it and write 1. And then write an A, and then write 2. And then write the N for am, and write the 3. And continue on finishing I am a great multitasker in 1 through 20, but alternating, switching back and forth from line to line. So timing it again, and pick up your pencils and go ahead and start. So that was 10 seconds. And 20 seconds. And 30 seconds. Take a few more seconds. So wherever you are, go ahead and stop. So unfortunately, we don't have sound for everybody, but if this were a live session, I would, ask you how that was. And undoubtedly, most of you did the first session. I would say all of you did the first exercise in less time than the second. And what we've found whenever we've done the exercise is that the second exercise, when we're multitasking, takes approximately twice as long as the first. Sometimes mistakes happen, but mistakes typically happen in the second exercise, not in the first, right? Because our brain is having to think harder about what is the next thing that it's switching to. And if we found one of them stressful, it was undoubtedly the second one. So those are 3 of the characteristics of multitasking that we've just experienced. Multitasking takes us more time, it leads to more mistakes, and it's usually more stressful. And what science has started to realize is that multitasking is actually a terrible coping mechanism in terms of coping with the things that we have to do. Evidence demonstrates that it makes us less productive, less creative, and less able to make good decisions. So we've experienced that. The studies all say that. Let's look at what else happens with multitasking, right? We saw that switch time, switching from thing to thing, that reduces our efficiency. It kills our ability to have a long-term overview about the task or the project that we're looking at. We start to get microly focused on details. Decreases quality, so more mistakes. It hampers creativity because our minds feel overloaded and full. It drains our energy. Multitasking has shown to use up much more glucose in the brain, which actually drains the brain of its ability to work effectively. And it reduces our well-being due to increased stress. Finally, and this is important to our conversation today, it rewires your brain. Multitasking can become your default working mode. You can get very good at switching back and forth. Even though you might get more efficient, these other negative effects will still continue to happen. So our proposition is that if multitasking is not the answer, then what is? And I'm going to put this slide up because it's really about attention. In order to deal with the paid reality, the pressure, the information overload, the distractions, not only do we need to have great time management skills, which are at the bottom, but we need to have calm, clear, and focused attention, right? We need to be able to pay attention to what we're looking at and to choose mindfully what we pay attention to. And then that in turn leads us to productivity. Attention leads us to results, and let's take a look at how that is. So whatever we want to achieve, whatever result we want to get, we get by taking an action, right? And actions are driven by the choice that we make. What am I going to focus on in this moment? What am I going to do to make that happen? And the choices we make come from our minds and what we decide to pay attention to, and how good our attention, the quality of our attention, leads to obviously better choices and better actions and better results. And what we're seeing is more recognition of that. Understanding and managing attention is now the single most important determinant of business success, according to a study by Accenture. So attention is really what we're starting to talk about. And there are two rules of mental effectiveness, right? Focus on what you choose. Where do you want to put your attention? And choose your distractions mindfully. So let's talk about the first one. So in the first one, right, you're focused on something. Let's say you're writing an email. And you're trying to get the email. It's a very detailed email. You want to stay focused on the key points. And two of your colleagues walk by and they start to have a conversation right behind you. And what does your mind do? It wants to switch over to listen to their conversation, right? And the hard thing in that scenario becomes, how do we stay focused on the email? Our brain wants to draw us away, naturally. In that case, the practice is to keep drawing your attention back. Focus on what you choose. We're going to talk today about how can we build our focus so that we can choose to stay focused on what's important and tune out what isn't. Rule number 2, choose your distractions mindfully. Let's say we're writing that email, right, and we're really engrossed in it. We've gotten into a good flow with it, and your boss comes and she knocks on your door. So at this point, we can't choose to ignore our boss. We need to take our attention away and turn it to her. At the same time, you wouldn't want to say to your boss, hey, what's up? And keep typing your email while looking over your shoulder to try to talk to your boss while typing the email, right? That wouldn't be very mindful. It would actually be trying to multitask. It wouldn't be very polite to your boss. So simple scenario, but we understand that in that scenario, number 2 means turn to your boss, give her your full attention, and then when that's done, you can turn back, focus on what you choose, which is your email. Okay, so 2 rules of mental effectiveness. And if for some of you that are more visually oriented, rule number 1 is focus. It's at the top. The opposite of focus is distraction. Rule number 2 is being fully aware or openly aware, as we say. And the opposite of that is sort of on autopilot, when you're just churning through things. If you've ever had that experience where you're so engrossed with something that you don't hear somebody that's trying to get your attention. And in these matrices, right, there's 4 quadrants. Quadrant number 2 is where we want to spend our time. Focused on what we choose, aware of what's happening around us so that we can continue to make the right choice, but really focused in achieving productivity. Flow is kind of that state of when we're on autopilot but deeply focused, right? We're immersed in something fully. We may not be aware of, say, an emergency situation or something that needs to pull our attention away. 4 is considered the creative state, where we're really aware and we're thinking almost, hyperkinetically about something, almost in a distracted way, right? We're trying to come up with new ideas, so we're letting the brain get into a state of distraction. Although if we really want to work fully with creativity, we need to learn how to bring it up to focus at some point so that we can take it deeper. And then 3 is that place where we really don't want to spend a lot of time, which is sort of distracted and on autopilot. That's when that happens when you get in your car to drive somewhere and you think about somewhere else and you realize the car is going in a completely different direction than where you intended because you were distracted, you were on autopilot, you took the same route you always took instead of going to where your destination was. So what we're talking about today is how do we get ourselves into quadrant 2 more often? And working harder doesn't always you know, working smarter isn't always working harder. Working smarter actually means using less mental energy, using, you know, less stress. It should be less stressful. It should be feel better to you. It should be easier. And let's come back to the brain. So the good news about this is that the brain has plasticity. So despite the fact that a lot of us, a lot of our days managing multiple things at once, our brains can actually be trained to learn to focus more. And that's called plasticity. The brain is plastic and find new ways. This is a representation of the neural networks of the brain. New neural networks are formed in the brain depending on how we works. Brain to have more focus and more attention, we start to build strong foundations for that. And again, I've talked about a lot of different things. Let's actually come to the practice of mindfulness. And how mindfulness training factors into this is that it actually helps us learn to manage our attention. Sometimes it's called attention training. And the foundation of mindfulness training, as we understand it and we lead it through the Potential Project, is really a four-step process, which is very simply laid out here. It's A, B, C, D. A stands for anatomy. It's how we set ourselves up physically. B stands for breath. It's a breath awareness exercise. C is for counting. We learn to count the breaths. The counting acts as our focus. It gives us the focus. And D, we will talk about what to do with distractions. So this is the mindfulness model, and we're going to go through it and do an actual exercise in a few minutes. But before we jump to that, I just wanted to give you a little overview, and then I want you to understand really that mindfulness gives you amazing focus, but some of the other things that it brings, right? So the brain is considered a muscle, and mindfulness is really training the attentional muscle. It trains our brain's ability to pay attention, to focus on what we choose, and to choose our distractions mindfully. Right, so that's happening through that neuroplasticity. And it really gives us that laser focused attention on the task at hand. All those other things can fall outside of the scope of our attention, that laser focused scope of attention. And this brings us back to how we will transform our productivity. So in addition to productivity, what else does mindfulness give us? And then we'll practice it. So there have been so many studies. There are new studies every day. And what I find reassuring about that is that they continually develop the science to go deeper. We now have magnetic resonance of the brain. We can watch people as they meditate and see which parts of the brain light up. But all the studies, each study confirms what the studies before it had shown. And that is that mindfulness increases our emotional intelligence. It increases creativity. It increases kindness, empathy, and happiness. And that's just due to the changes in the brain as we bring our attention back to just attention training over and over again. We're decreasing the parts of the brain that show stress and create negativity in the brain. So increased kindness, empathy, happiness, less stress, we improve our memory. So we're thickening that the red part of this this diagram is really the prefrontal cortex, which gets stronger and it gets bigger. And the brain actually changes over time as we practice mindfulness. And the parts of the brain down here, the amygdala at the base of the neck, gets smaller. The amygdala controls our emotional response. Our emotional responses, anger, frustration, irritation, decrease. And that part of the brain actually gets smaller. And this red part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, and the part devoted to memory, the hippocampus, get bigger and they get stronger. So there's actually a physical component to what happens inside our brains. What happens inside the body? Well, the body and brain are intimately connected, and the signals they send to each other reinforce each other. And what happens is our blood pressure gets more balanced. The cells show less signs of aging. We sleep better. There's more blood flow throughout the body. Our immunity gets better, right? People get less illness, less sickness. And our heart rate gets slower, which is a positive thing. So body and mind ramifications of practicing mindfulness. Many, many, many studies. If you Google it in the popular press, you will find a lot out there. And then, what does this translate for employers? Because we do a lot of work inside companies, and we have to show that mindfulness actually has some positive benefit to the organization itself. So the top part of the screen, this upward-facing arrow, these are the things that improve and increase job performance, problem solving, job satisfaction, work-life balance. We're better able to manage that. Our focus gets better. We become more ethical, right? Creativity, how we deal with each other. Team engagement is better. Communication skills get better. And what decreases? Some of these things we've touched on already. So we can see where mindfulness can have really great ramifications, not just for ourselves personally, but also for our organizations. If we're practicing this ourselves or at work, benefits both ways. And the challenge that I'd like to issue at this point is, do you think you can practice mindfulness for just 10 minutes a day and practice those 2 rules of mental effectiveness, right? And what of those things, any of these, I would be curious, what would you find? Which of these things do you feel you could most use improvements in, or decreases in if it's a stress or a negative? Let's get into and actually practice mindfulness. We haven't done it yet. I've talked a lot about it. It's a very simple process. So if everybody is sitting, if you are sitting, if you could sit nice and tall and feet on the floor, just comfortable. Try not to slouch. It's good if the spine is nice and straight. We want to stay awake while we're doing this. This is attention training. We want to hold our focus. So sitting nice and tall, relaxed. The breathing is next, right? So you can keep your eyes closed or almost closed or slightly softly open. I want you to start to notice your breathing. The breath is the anchor for our attention. It's what we will learn to focus on. The reason we use the breath is because it's always with us. So whether you're on a plane, in a car, in a hotel room, wherever you are, in a doctor's waiting room, the breath is always there. If you want to practice this, you need to just take a little break from your day, just decrease your stress level a little bit. You can always find the breath. So in the breath, we would just start to notice. Notice an inhale and notice an exhale. And to the extent you can, make your breath natural and smooth. It's just like watching TV. We just want to keep it as it always is, just nice and even. C is where we start to find the attention training. As we practice the exercise, we're going to count the breath. So an inhale would be 1. And an exhale would be that same 1. So inhale, exhale 1. And then inhale, exhale 2. Inhale, exhale 3. All the way up to 10. And when you get to 10, you reverse it and come back to 1. So the combination of the breathing and the counting, the focus there is where we're learning to train the attention. And then D, a distraction. Things will happen. They will be either external, right? You hear a noise. You'll sense something, some wind maybe on your face. A thought will come up. Thoughts are the usual distractions we find when we practice mindfulness. Something will come up, and you'll notice suddenly that you're no longer counting from 1 to 10 in your breaths, but you're either on 15 or you've completely lost track and you're thinking about dinner later tonight. In that case, just start again at 1. So let's try this. Rely on all of you out there to participate to the best of your ability. If you've never practiced mindfulness, just go with it. So let's sit nice and tall. When you're ready, you can close your eyes or soften them, slightly open if you prefer. And then bring awareness to your breathing. Just start to notice your inhales and exhales. If for some reason they're not naturally even, just find a natural breath. Breathing through the nose. And now I want you to try to count the breaths. So each inhale, exhale is a count of 1. We'll count up to 10 and come back from 10 to 1. And whenever you encounter distractions, just release them and come back to the breath, come back to the counting. So we'll try this for about a minute. So whenever you're ready, go ahead and start. Okay, so that was about a minute. And take a few breaths, sort of like come back to focus the PowerPoint away from the breath. What we find, whether you've done mindfulness or not, especially when you're in a situation like this where, you know, we're sort of sitting in energetically, at least with a lot of other people. We're not all in the same space, but energetically we are together here. It can be very difficult, right? It can be very difficult to find that focus. If you were able to focus and count, I wonder, what number did you get up to before your mind got distracted? You know, whenever I do this live, people sometimes say they got to 1 before they got distracted. Some people get up to 5 or 6. Very few people can get all the way up to 10. And even fewer people can get up to 10 and 10 all the way back to 1 without the mind being distracted. And I think that's a very simple and beautiful experience with the brain and how hard it is to maintain attention. So what this practice does for us, hopefully you remember that picture of the brain holding a little barbell, right? This exercise trains the brain to pay attention. So in the moment of mindfulness, you're paying attention to the breath, right, and the counting. But what this does is it trains your attentional muscle of the brain so that when you're at work, you can pay attention to what's in front of you and not get pulled away by a conversation that's happening 50 feet away. When you're with your children, right, maybe at night and trying to help them with their homework, or with your spouse at night, that you're not getting pulled away to pick up your phone every time it vibrates, right? Learning to pay attention to what's in front of you, what's important, what are you choosing to pay attention to? So that is the basic mindfulness practice. And let's come back to the 30-day challenge. For people that are on this webinar, you know, I'd love it for you to try it. 10 minutes a day has shown in many, many studies significant changes in the mind and the body. Some of those things that we looked at a few slides ago. 10 minutes a day of formal mindfulness using that ABCD. There are apps out there. Potential Project has an app. If you go to the App Store and Google the Potential Project, you'll find it. There's other guided mindfulness apps out there. You really just want to find something, if you prefer to have guided mindfulness, that's going to keep you focused and keep your attention. And then the other thing that I'd like us to do is to practice the 2 roles of mental effectiveness. Practice focusing on what you choose, and practice choosing your mind distractions mindfully, so that if you do pull your attention away, you're doing that mindfully. You're giving full attention to the next thing that you're choosing, right? And there's a beautiful Zen saying that says, basically, when you wash the dish, right? It means if you're washing the dish, don't be talking on the phone at the same time or giving instructions to your husband about taking the garbage out. It really means give all the care and attention you can to what is in front of you. And then that in itself, through the process of rewiring the brain, leads to so many positive things, the productivity, the effectiveness. It makes us happier. As we find our focus gets more finely tuned, it brings us more joy and happiness. And you're going to have to trust me on that, or practice this for yourself for 30 days, and then hopefully you can all let me know that that happened. So let's talk about, okay, so we know we have the practice 10 minutes a day. We can focus on what we want, choose our distractions mindfully, but what are some other ways to practice mindfulness? Mindfulness has gotten so popular. There's like I've seen like mindful communication coaches. I've seen, mindful running sessions. But what does it mean actually to you individually? This is a personal choice. Technology is a big part of how we get distracted. What are some things you might do? Maybe jot them down right now while we're in this session. It's the best way to hold on to this. What might you do technologically? I try to plug in my phone, put it away somewhere, and from 7 to 10, I'm just sort of fully present with my family. What can you do if you're part of this webinar today from a work perspective? What are some things you might do in your organization? If you're a team leader or a manager or a leader of any kind, what are some things you might want to do in meetings, for instance? Technology-free meetings are a great way to bring some more focus and some more awareness into a meeting. So listening mindfully is an easy one. This is something that if we were working together, we would spend a lot of time on. We'll talk about it just briefly because
Muted.
it will completely rework the dynamic in that moment and then that dynamic going forward if you start to pay full attention and listen mindfully to the people in your life. The other side of that, right, is speaking mindfully. So when we're speaking, is it appropriate? Is it meaningful to that moment? Is it necessary? Right? Compassionate. Is it compassionate? Does it have to be said? And is it timed? Meaning, is it the time to say that? And what can you say that's just enough without going overboard? Right? So clear, concise, compassionate conversation. So those are two very simple ways I wanted to share with you, something you could maybe practice, take forward as you go throughout the rest of your week this week. So try it out. See what happens. It's a great way to practice mindfulness real time and to see what happens. It's a little bit easier too than the 10-minute a day practice, but you know, that's why all of these companies, clients that we have, they come to this because, well, so many reasons. It helps develop leadership, creativity, potential. These are some quotes from clients the Potential Project has worked with all over the world. It reduces distractions. It drives organizational effectiveness. Personal well-being is better, right? The time management piece gets better because we're more aware of how we're spending our time, what we're giving our time to, right? Some more on mental calm and focus and creativity from the advertising industry. This touches on the ethical implications of mindfulness. People become more compassionate. They will do the right things and become more grateful, right? This is the happiness part of it. So to wrap up, my challenge to you is, and I'm going to put up my email address on the last slide, I would love it if everybody that's part of this call, to the extent that you want to stay engaged over the next month, practice this for 30 days, 10 minutes a day, ABCD method. You can use an app or just try it yourself. Practice the 2 rules of mental effectiveness. And if you want to go for the expert level, practice mindful communications, right? The stop listening and the act on the speaking. And then for anybody that's part of this organizationally that might be interested in organizational mindfulness, you can always contact me. I'm happy to talk to individuals about this as an individual. I'm also happy to talk to people about what this might mean at a company level for creativity, for employee well-being, for team engagement, and things like that. So that's it for me. I know we have a little bit of time for some questions. So I will pass it back to Leanne, and we'll take some questions. And I think you're muted, Leanne or Lauren, if you're trying to speak. If we could.
Unmuted.
I think we're having some technical issues. Everybody could just hold tight for a few minutes.
Muted.
Maybe what I'll ask while we figure out the technical side is if anybody has questions, you should have the ability to type in. Here we have some comments. So if you want to type in your questions here into this box, and then we can start to compile those questions and perhaps answer some right now. If you'd like to email me, you can always reach out to me. My email address is here on the screen. And we will, okay, well, I'll answer some questions now. How do you feel this can work alongside TM? Okay, I'm going to go that TM is Transcendental Meditation. They are complementary practices. As we're looking at mindfulness today, it's more of
Muted.
here is a basic breath practice, which you may be familiar with, whether you're a beginner or advanced. It's always good to come back to the breath and the counting because we do
Muted.
to improve ADD. I am not specifically aware of the studies that deal with attention deficit, but I do know that this has been tested on it, and I can certainly find that information, or we could, I encourage you to do some research yourself. Anytime you're working on mental effectiveness in the brain and focus and attention, you would hope to see a change in attention, which is what you're talking about with ADD. Here's a great question. Women by nature are more multitaskers with kids, homes, work, etc. How much damage could we have, and does it take longer to develop a practice? Okay, that's a great question. I wouldn't call it damage. I think, our brains have gotten used to constantly being on. And what this practice does is it helps us rewire the neural networks of the brain to be, more positive. Does it take, there we go. Does it take longer to develop the practice? There I am. Certainly, if you have more time to devote to mindfulness, the more time spent on a daily basis, the more benefits, the deeper the benefits. But I'd say start small and see where you can take this. Do I work with children is the next question. I do not. I am specifically an executive coach and a corporate mindfulness consultant. But if you email me, I can certainly find you some options for working with children. The next question is, are your slides available for printout? They are not, unfortunately, because we have had intellectual property issues with our content, unfortunately, in the past. We do not give out slides. But if there's anything that you saw that you would like some more clarity on, or a study that was referenced that you'd like me to send you some more information on, just please email me and I will get that to you. I'll take just a few more questions. Where can I get a copy of the research proof of the benefit of mindfulness? There are thousands of studies that prove the benefits of mindfulness. So the person that sent this, you can either Google that yourself or you can email me and I will send you links to the studies or the studies themselves. I have some of those. Okay, and then I'm going to take this as the final question, and then if there's more questions, if you would please email me. Why is breathing practice important? That's a great question. The breath is always with us. It's something we can practice wherever we are. It's a great way as an introduction to the practice of developing open awareness. The breath is sort of step one, and I think it's a great place to start. It's tangible. You can feel it. It's a great place to put your attention.
Muted.
It's straightforward. It's always with you. Okay. So hopefully our organizers have gotten their sound back. And I will wrap up. And do we have Lauren or Deanne or anybody from the Volunteer Center on the line?
Unmuted.
No. Yes. Hello. Yes. Is this Lauren? Okay, well, in the absence of Lauren or Deanne with us, I am going to wrap up the session and say thank you to everybody for being part of this. I hope you learned something informational and useful to you today. Absolutely encourage you to try out the 30-day mindfulness challenge. Stay in touch with me via my email address. And stay in touch with the Volunteer Center. I know they have more webinars coming up in the future and some more exciting things happening. So thank you very much to everybody. I am going to shut off my webcam now and wish everybody a wonderful afternoon.